This is Breaking Down Security, and I'm Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my
God. I guess
we're already off to a good start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I just woke up. Sorry.
All right. Well, this is a very interesting podcast. When I started InfoSec, if you had told me that we'd be talking to this person today, I would not have believed it. We are talking to, oh God, I'm going to get the last name wrong. It's a name thing. I'm sorry. Hector Monsegur?
Monsegur, yeah.
Monsegur, okay. Most of
Don't
you
worry, that happens on every podcast.
Yes, I'm sorry, Hector. So most of your eyebrows went up when you heard that, obviously. If you know this person, he has he's very he's very polarizing depending on who you are in the InfoSec world. We've had him on tonight because we want to talk about some InfoSec things. Obviously, we're not going to go as far back in his past as many of you are probably wanting to hear. So if you are wanting to understand his past, he has a Wikipedia page. He's given interviews with 60 Minutes, and a lot of his past is public record. So welcome, Hector, to the show. We're going to start off by asking you what you've been doing in the last, say, 2 years.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak with you guys.
Right.
So the last couple of years, well, starting from last year, I believe May 26th, that's when my supervised release was over.
Mm-hmm.
So since then, I've pretty much just jumped right back into the security research scene, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting ride because, I was banned off the internet for several years, starting from 2012.
Wow.
You also have to remember I was in prison for a while, and then I had a gag order. And, even when you fast forward to today, there's still topics I can't talk about because they're national security level.
Mm-hmm.
3 topics. So anyways, but since my return, I've been doing everything from just penetration testing, just general security research, catching up for all those years I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of bug bounty stuff. I mean, that was the first thing I could do to make money as soon as I returned. So
interesting. Bug bounties.
Yeah. Oh,
so,
yeah.
How hard? Obviously, it was difficult for you to get a job because of the obvious background checks. A lot of companies still require background checks, so a legitimate type corporate job is probably not in the cards for you, I'd imagine.
Well, that's the thing. Like, even though I did cause a lot of damage during my, I guess I don't want to use the word reign, but my reign, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to remember I've been hacking as a black hat since 1995. I've been doing this for close to 20 years.
Wow.
So, then of course my arrest happened, right? And I, had to, work or not work, but I had a cooperation agreement where I had to help the government stop a lot of attacks.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at my court records, they attributed me to over 300 attacks that I stopped. Kind of funny how that works because that's more attacks than most security companies have stopped, for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, coming back, it was difficult. I had a lot of people try to reach out to me or connect with me, offer me jobs and deals and a whole bunch of stuff. But it always ended up in the same, with the same conclusion. Yeah, we can't really hire you. We know who you are, right? We know that, you're Sabu or you're Hector Monsegur, and we know that you were a black hat many years ago. And we brought you this entire way with a job offer and paperwork and contracts, and then we just can't hire you. Last minute stuff, and this happened a lot. It kind of surprised me how many times this happened. I'm realistic, and I know how the industry works. Like I even had my own security company in 2004. Tiger Team Security out of Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I've been around. I understand, but I just did not expect how many companies would offer me a job and just take it back at the end. So yeah, you're completely right in your assessment that it was definitely hard to get a job upon my return.
Very cool. So the bug bounties, how did by what was the year then big bug bounties became legit? Like 2011, 2012, around that area?
Well, no, I mean, I don't recall it going that far. I mean, you got to remember at the time I was busy doing something else, right? I was, participating in hacktivism and I was infiltrating networks, and then my arrest happened. So if bug bounties were taken off in 2011, 2012, I just didn't see it. Um, all I know is that upon my return, as soon as I came back, I saw that bug bounty programs and platforms were out there. People were making tons of money, and I just jumped right into it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So you and I obviously have opinion. I have an opinion about bug bounties. During our email chain, I said I have an opinion about those, but maybe you could give us an idea of how you feel about bug bounties. Are they actually useful to a company, or are they ultimately something that's going to backfire on a company in the long run?
Well, unfortunately, I'm a very honest person, so I'm going to tell you, and this might bother some people, but I really think bug bounty programs are a hit and miss. And I feel for certain companies it may be useful. Um, for a lot of companies, it may not be useful. You may gain more by just hiring a security company to help you with audits, source code audits, help you with development stuff. I mean, there's so much you could do. Even hiring in-house, bringing your own security staff in-house. I mean, of course, it all depends on your budget.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at these bug bounty reports, especially the ones that go public, I've always found it weird that they keep these security reports private in many cases. Like, I can understand why, but I always found it weird that most of them are kept private for some reason. Um, a lot of it is client side vulnerabilities, and I understand that that's where a majority of researchers, for whatever reason, are focusing on. Um, but I'm looking at it from like statistic from the statistic end. The ratio of high level vulnerabilities like remote execution or XXC through OOB, out of bounds, external entity attacks and stuff like that, you're not seeing as often as you see, 100,000 cross-site scripting vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's like I said, it's a hit and miss.
So Hector,
I think
why do you think that is? I mean, you said the ratio of high level vulnerabilities is not what you would think. I mean, is that because somebody's working on a let's say it's a website. Somebody's working on a website and they think that they can make some money, but then they find something really egregious, like maybe a command injection or something, and they're like, man, that $200, that's just not worth it, right? I could sell this on the dark net, and I'm using air quotes, for a lot more than that,
It's possible, right? I'm sure that has happened, but I think most of the problem, I think the main part of the problem is that you have to sit down and read the bug bounty program scope. These scopes are unrealistic. I'll give you a great example. I'm not talking bad of them, but the United Airlines bug bounty program, I spent a lot of time with them. I made almost 7 figures in miles with them. Like, United Airlines is pretty cool. I thought it was really interesting that they went ahead with that bug bounty program, and their manager, Ben, is very nice, but their scope is highly limited.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you a case in point. I spent, I don't know, maybe 4 hours with an old partner of mine, and we discovered about 30 vulnerabilities in UnitedAirlines.com or United.com.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of the vulnerabilities came back duplicate. So then we started working on bypasses. So we were able to still execute the exploits. We were still able to gain information. We were using vulnerability chaining. We were doing a whole bunch of cool stuff, and it came back duplicate because of the scope problem. Their scope was just too limited. So out of frustration, I went further. I broke out of the scope, just a little bit, just a tad bit. And I discovered vulnerabilities in their security system, which they have like a email gateway security system that automatically replaces links. And I said, well, you're not going to accept these vulnerabilities. I provided 30 different bugs. Well, how about these? And they wrote back like, hey, that was out of the scope, but we're still going to pay you because, thank you for finding those bugs. And so they're not going to open up their scope anytime soon. And the same applies to a lot of these other companies. Now, there's also another problem to this question, to this situation. Going back to your question. And so why aren't more researchers coming up with more high-level vulnerabilities? I mean, you could attribute that to better development, especially these days. People have come a long way from just accepting all input input from parameters. Okay, cool. But also, if you look at the kind of researchers that are doing the bug bounty programs, right? A lot of these guys are just using burp, and I don't know whether they're limiting themselves on purpose or they're just looking to make quick money. It's kind of like, there's kind of like a fallacy here. You know how people say, well, open source software, is so secure, way more secure than closed source software. But how many vulnerabilities have been open on GitHub for so many years and people have not discovered them? The Linux kernel is open and accessible to everyone, and every year or every few months, there's some, 0-day vulnerability that some guy had just sitting in his home directory for like 3 years. So there's a lot of answers to that question.
Yeah, see, my experience with bug bounty programs is my company, we use a bug bounty program to find vulnerabilities, and we were using it for a while until somebody just came out of the blue and said, hey, you have a vulnerability on your page. And we're like, well, who is this guy? How does he know to contact us? And what had happened was this guy went rogue and basically started throwing us stuff on the side because he thought he would get a better payout from us than he would from the bug bounty program, because I guess they take a cut from what we give them to pay the researcher. So after we basically found out this guy didn't know what he was talking about, his bug report was crap anyway, and it was a false positive. All we did was contact the person that he actually works for, and we got him fired, which we got him let go because he'd already, I guess, had issues with his reporting styles anyway, and his bug reports were not fully fleshed out and what have you. But all we've done is made him mad at us, gotten him basically unemployed or less employed than he was before. So it's hard to control those folks who are in the bug bounty program anyway, because there's nothing really keeping them from going off onto the side here and trying to do exactly what that guy did.
Yeah, but people are gonna, if they're gonna do that regardless if there's a bug bounty program or not. Yeah. You know how many times I sit on Twitter and I'm looking at timelines and there's always like, there's a really cool like client-side researchers, Mario something. You guys might know who I'm talking about. I think that's the guy that runs HTMLsec.org or something. HTML5sec or something. So someone sent him an email like, hey, I found a vulnerability on your site. How much are you paying for the bug? I think that's another bad consequence of this, that, it's pushing these researchers to pretty much email anybody, cold email someone like, hey, I just found a bug on your site. Are you paying for this or what?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to us.
Yeah. And it's horrible and it's dangerous. Now, is that something that's totally against the bug bounty concept? No, it's just against their character. But
the proper disclosure is helpful. And then of course, you've got the companies like Facebook who or eBay, where the guys end up going public because eBay had told them that one already existed in their system, and
Yep.
the guy was still expecting to get paid for something that already existed in their system, and finally he got. I think there was one guy, he got paid, but there was a language barrier involved in trying to get the vulnerability disclosed properly, and it's just different cultures sometimes. Not even most bug bounty people are not in the United States, so it may not
It's
even be
very
their
true.
first language. So
Yeah. And that's another thing. I mean, we could spend the whole night talking about this. There's so many problems with bug bounty programs, and there's also a lot of good with these platforms. Like I think HackerOne is doing really decent. That the person that works for them or with them, Katie, I forgot her last name, but she seems like she's really doing her thing when it comes down to HackerOne and bug bounties in general. And BugCrowd is pretty nice too. Like I've used all these platforms as a test bed to see, how they operate. But there's just so many problems. I mean, case in point, let's say you find a massive bug in some sort of program that's hosted by HackerOne. They pay you, but you still have to go through a 1099 or W-9 through HackerOne. So what are you? Are you a HackerOne contractor at this point? This is a lot of confusing stuff going on. And I think that things will get better once these platforms figure out what they're doing, because there's still a lot of room to learn and fix a lot of these issues.
Do you think that a good model would be to have a bug bounty program but not announce it? For example, you have an email address that's in a comment on the code of your web page or whatever. So if anyone's looking source, they can see that, but regular people just won't, drive by, see it. And, you don't announce it, but if somebody's actually looking for something, they come across that and they say, okay, well, I found something, but let me try this route, right?
It sounds like an interesting concept. I get it. But the problem with that is a lot of automated security scanners will find source code and just add it to the report. Burp is a great example. Acunetics does the same. So if you have a script kiddie scanning an entire subnet, he's going to run into your site and read the comment and send you an email. So, I mean, it sounds like it's a cool concept, but you're going to end up with false positives.
Right.
So you advocate more of the hands-on approach, having an internal red team, if you will, or having I don't know, they call it purple team or green team or whatever the buzzword is these days, that will go in and actively attack or actively fuzz or do whatever to find the vulnerabilities for the company. It's just safer that way.
Well, I mean, that's an idea. Recently I had the same conversation with a good friend of mine. We were talking about bug bounty programs. The person is against it. They're against the concept in general. They're like, well, you could just hire a company. I'm like, nah, this is cool because you know what? It gives researchers something to look forward to. Imagine all those black hats. Imagine those researchers, some of which could have been just full-blown black hats. And because they just got a $200 bonus or payment from Yahoo, they're like, wow, I can make money just, doing research. So it's potentially life-saving. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If there was bug bounty programs during the 90s and early 2000s, when I was really infiltrating networks, and I've hacked into everything at this point, or at that point, because I'm, retired, I could have made a whole bunch of money. I wish I could go back in time and start the idea and be like, hey, let me run a bug bounty program for you and get some researchers. And you know what? Let's pay them right. And that's another thing. You have researchers finding really, really awesome vulnerabilities. I think there was a article by a guy. I'm bad with names. I apologize, gentlemen. But
okay.
This guy found a vulnerability in Snapchat. You remember this? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, that does sound familiar.
I mean, when you read the whole story, it's extremely melodramatic, and he goes over the edge. But he owns Snapchat. Like he really had access to everything. And from full read and write access to the S3 buckets to accessing customer information and staff information. And so he approached them and, said, hey, listen, this is what I have. And they're like, well, that's outside the scope. when something like that happens, you're gonna spawn a super black hat that's just straight up upset with you and is really gonna own you and destroy you. There's a lot of miscommunication going on. That's my personal opinion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think the bug bounty concept, it could work. It just needs a lot of tuning. Now, let me give you a quick idea. I know I'm talking your ears off. My bad.
No, it's okay.
So back to the conversation I was having with my friend. We were talking about how, all right, for example, HackerOne, they have the private bug bounties. And they usually invite like the top researchers. And what that does is they'll leave a whole bunch of researchers to deal with duplicates as soon as they go public. I think that's extremely corny, and that's the wrong way to go about it, because you're going to disenfranchise security researchers who actually need to make this money by hunting for bugs. What they should do is do rotations where they'll take, randomly selected researchers, let's say 10 to 20 of them, put them on a private bug bounty, let them work at it, bring in another rotation, and just swap it around until they go public, or they just keep it private and just keep following this process. You're still going to get the same kind of research. You're going to get a whole bunch of false positives because that's part of the whole bug bounty system apparently, but you're still going to get the same quality, and you're not disenfranchising anybody. You know what I'm saying? So it's a whole bunch of things. There's a whole bunch of ways to fix this. I just don't know who's going to fix it and when,
Yeah, no, that's a good yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I agree. I think I think that there's a long way to go before we actually find out what we're gonna. We need to find an equilibrium that works for everybody.
Oh,
involved,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. So when I actually asked a couple of friends of mine who are also fellow podcasters questions that they might want to ask you, and one of them asked, "What is the quickest win for corporate security to make a difference?" And he has another part 2 question. But what is the quickest win that corporate security could get to make a difference in their security posture?
This is something that I learned on my own by, so many years of, I guess, my little black hat penetration testing, however you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a massive lack of education. I feel from the developers to systems administrators to even regular staff members, secretaries, and so on. I think a big part of what a corporate company should do regarding security is really focus on education and letting people know, and even having workshops. There's no reason why you can't set up a workshop for an hour out of a month and discuss security threats against the company. Even if it's the secretary, I guarantee you that she's going to pick up on it. And you want everyone to be aware of what could potentially come in and harm the company. All right, there's a cliched saying that you're only as strong as your weakest link. All right, so you have a security team. All right, yeah, you just got a $500,000 contract with some security company, and they're doing managed security, or they're doing automated testing every day. But they're not looking for 0 days. They're not looking for bugs. They're not reading logs. You know what I'm saying? Now, what if you have some team members reading logs? What if you have some team members looking for signs of intrusion? Why is this directory all of a sudden hosted on the public web server? And why is it hosting, SQL dumps? All that little stuff adds up if you could just start educating your own people. So my answer is education. I might sound like a nut here, but I think that's key to every organization, from the biggest corporate companies to the smallest of nonprofit organizations.
So what are the 3 topics you can't talk about?
That's funny. That's hilarious.
I'm just asking
I could generalize.
I'm not asking you to talk about them. I just want to know what they are.
They involve industrial systems. That's as far as I could go.
Okay. All right. Well, yes, as we know, there are a lot of people who are looking into industrial control systems, SCADA, that kind of thing. It's the new hotness, from what I understand.
Well, it's
So
been the hotness since 2011 when we started breaking into ICS systems.
that's
So
true. That's true. Okay. All right. So let me see. What else did?
now, can I say something about that though?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Sure. Not, talk
Let me
about it.
just make a random point that makes no sense to this conversation, but it's something I think about often. What if I was never stopped? What if we were never stopped? By the time I was arrested, we was already breaking into industrial systems. We were, I had access to millions of dollars worth of manuals. I was reading and analyzing, default setups, you know, and at that time of my life, I don't know now, right? As a man now, I honestly don't know what I would have done if I would have accessed something that I was not supposed to access.
Are you
It's
trying to
just
say you left some interpreter scripts or something sitting around on a box that we?
nah. I don't use Metasploit. I was mostly a manual guy when it came down to my intrusions. But I'm saying like, you know, it's scary. It's a scary thought when you think about it. In hindsight, now that I think about it, like I look at myself back in those days, and I just can't believe the stuff I was doing. I'm embarrassed. When people ask me those questions about this topic or these topics because that's not me. I was just an aggressive person at that time. I was angry at the world,
Yeah.
and it's scary to me how far I got.
Yeah.
It's
Were you an
scary to
anti?
me. Huh?
Were you an anti-capitalist at the time, and
No, no,
and you
I
had
wasn't
those
an
kind of?
anarchist. No, I wasn't an anarchist or anti-capitalist. I was. See, look, for me, you know, I don't like bullies. I don't like people that try to get over on other people. I don't like people that abuse weaklings or whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It irks me. It bothers me. So when I see people in power messing around with other people, especially those that are not in power, it kind of upset me a little bit. That's why, and this is something a lot of people don't know. Like my grandmother passed away, and I became a foster parent, and my fiance left me all at the same time, and I lost my job at the same time. So what you had was the result of a very angry person. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And some of it was my politics. Some of it was my hunger for knowledge, because that's ingrained in every hacker, no matter if they're neophytes or they've been doing this for 20 years. Um, but some of it was also like anger and hear me roar, right? I mean, it's, as corny as that sounds, that was just the truth at the time. But it wasn't an anarchist thing. There were anarchists part of the groups, but that's not really my cup of tea.
So does it bother you that you're now working for? I can only presume some of your companies, but some of the companies you work for now for pen testing and security are some of the companies that you railed against when you were a black hat. Does that bother you?
No, I haven't run into that situation yet. No.
Okay. And what happens when you go into a company and they realize who you are? Is it like, oh, hey, Hector, how you doing? And then they realize, oh, you're Hector, or you're that guy. What happens? Does it change? I mean, do you ever go in cold like that, where somebody doesn't know who you
I th- I
were
think
and now they find out?
I think people have realized it, but the quality of my reports, the kind of intrusions and stuff that I'm doing, the security research are coming up with, is just making up for the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these days, my focus is my family. My focus is just being professional and doing what I have to do.
Mm.
Um, you know, and that's the best I could do. If someone feels uncomfortable, then we could talk about it. But I'm reformed. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
There's only so long. There's only so much time you could hold something against someone. You
yeah.
understand? So
Well, a lot of people in the United States believe that, and unlike European, penal system, is that you're put in jail to be punished. You're not being put in prison to be reformed. A lot of
yeah.
overseas and in Europe, it's to reform the person and to help them understand what they did wrong and to make them a better person when they get out.
Oh
Here,
yeah.
even after you've done your time, you are stigmatized. So you're still suffering the prison after you've been released from prison.
Oh yeah. And that's what I've been dealing with. I mean, especially when I really first came back. I was asked to go to the RSA conference, and I was supposed to be like a big thing at the end of the whole entire conference. And
Mm-hmm.
last minute, someone was like, "Whoa, no, you kind of hacked into one of our sponsors, so you can't." And so it frustrated me because I'm like, I understand and I apologize. Like I'm remorseful. Like I feel bad that I hacked into these security companies, especially. That's one thing people forgot. They talk about Sony and they talk about PBS, but they kind of miss the fact that not only did I hack into the FBI's InfraGard organization, but I also broke into top 10 security companies and federal contractors. And and towards that point in my life, it was more especially those hacks. It was I was trying to indirectly tell people like, dude, there's no security. I mean, if these security companies get hacked, I mean, and by the way, that's not a really good example either, because anyone could get hacked. It doesn't matter who. But it was just a crazy experience. And as for what you say about people coming out and it's hard for them to reform, I totally agree, and that's why we have a big problem with repeat offenders in this country. Because we don't believe in reform for whatever reason, and so what's the point of prison? At that point, we're just all being we're just being hypocrites, and when we're living with double standards, and that's something that's terrible. Let me tell you something, bro. I was in prison. I was at a maximum facility, and I got to experience a whole wide variety of characters and personalities. And I'm not talking about a random drug dealer from a corner. I'm talking about I was hanging out with, cartel members. I was hanging out with like actual murderers and hitmen and enforcers and and I'm just there for what they call cyber terrorism. I was there as a hacker, right? So it was surreal for me to be hanging around with guys that have 500 bodies underneath their belts, and these are the most normal people you will ever meet in your life. So now the question is, after they do their 20 years, are they really reformed? I mean, how can they be reformed when there's no education in prison?
It's hard to learn a new trade when you're stuck making license plates or whatever it is that you guys, whatever they do in prison. It doesn't translate well.
Well, I tell you what, if you want to do a case in point scientific experiment, get yourself locked up for a month. I guarantee you come out a better criminal. You'll learn more trades coming out than you did when you initially went in.
So did you get into the psychology of why people, I don't know, end up that way, right? As a black hat or whatever, something happened in the beginning. You said, these things happen and you were angry. I mean, I read, I'm not going to compare you to anyone, right? But I read Mein Kampf a few years ago just to see how this guy ended up this way, the anti-Semitic rants, and then people voted for the guy and they made him leader of their country, even though they knew the underlying beliefs that he had. I mean, did you
see his story is complicated though? His story is way more complicated than my story will ever be, because in his case, Germany was dealing with the splitting of Poland, and they were basically split into chunks. That was the whole point of the Third Reich, to reunite everyone, to reunite the countries, bring back the German Empire. So when he came out speaking about reuniting the German Empire, people were like, yeah. Let's ignore the fact that he's kind of crazy, because he's going to unite us again. He's going to bring back Poland, and he's going to do all this cool stuff. And we don't have to live in poverty no more and suffer. Look at the Brits and look at the French. Look how well they're doing.
Well, they were still sucking from the reparations that they had to pay in World War I.
Absolutely,
they were still
they were
financially
destroyed.
hurt. They didn't have the Marshall Plan like the Japanese did in World War II.
Yeah, the Japanese came out of it swinging. But look at Germany, 50 years later. I mean, they're a powerhouse economically.
And privacy-wise.
And privacy-wise, they're way better than us. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm sure there was a question, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, how people end up on
the psychology of a black hat,
right? Like that.
Well, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for another man. I can't give you another man's perspective. All right. So In my case, and I'll give you a quick gist of my life story, real quick. Um, when I was a kid, I came from a different environment. I didn't come from, any suburbia. I didn't have the kind of support that many other in this industry had growing up. I came from the streets. I was born and raised in a ghetto called the Lower East Side. Now it's gentrified, so they call it the East Village. It's nice and trendy now.
Okay.
So in those days, the streets were very different. We had a lot of organized crime. In fact, my family came from an organized crime syndicate themselves. So, there was a point in '96 when my entire family goes to prison, and I was by myself literally for 2 months in the street. All right. Now, my grandmother comes back out of prison. It sucks they brought her in. A conspiracy. Conspiracy is a white dragnet. I think we all know that. And now it's just a really lonely kid with his very depressed grandmother, and they're both stuck in an apartment, and there's nothing in that apartment but a TV and a computer and a phone line. So then you have the kid on the computer, on the phone line, going online and reading and escaping from the war on drugs, escaping from the loss of family, and finding a new world. The beauty of the ball, the world of the electron. If you guys ain't know, that was a reference to the Hacker's Manifesto.
Yeah.
And so I read the Hacker's Manifesto, and it changed my life. It changed my life because this man, who I do not know, and I would love to meet one day, the mentor, he said, I do not judge you by the way you look. I just judge you by, what you say and think, not what you look like, right? And it inspired me. Maybe I want to be a hacker now. I've already seen war games and sneakers and hackers, and I've seen all these films. It seems interesting. And I've never been able to be creative. I've never been creative, rather. I'm not an artist. I do write poetry and stories, but I never got to create something. It just, eventually I figured out that I'm very good at breaking things. Mm-hmm. So you have a 12-year-old kid in front of a computer knowing that he could break things. And what's the first thing he learns? Basic.
Hey, me too.
There you go. So now I'm playing around with basic, and then I reach a point where I'm like, damn, but there's got to be more to this. I hear about Linux, and a couple of weeks later, I'm running Slackware. So I'm a kid in the projects in the middle of the ghetto where everyone's selling drugs and shooting and doing whatever they're doing, and I'm booting up for the first time Slackware OS, and it was like the coolest experience. I felt like I was, on a new frontier. All right. Mm-hmm. So now, to bring it back to your original question, there's a trend here. The first time I got online and I began doing security research, I was escaping. And the second time I did it, I had lost everything yet again. I was escaping. So my story is I was just escaping from, my personal problems. That's how I became a black hat. I can't really speak for anybody else, but I'm sure there's other similar stories. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with people that are antisocial, or they have some sort of disorder, Asperger's, or, dyslexia, or whatever it is. They have social problems. And that's why we have a whole bunch of security researchers. You go to a conference and you have rooms filled with antisocial people.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing that, you could say to deflect that. It's just a reality. It's part of our industry. So, maybe the same applies to the other black hats.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see, I've gone to, there's definitely a stereotypical person. Like, I've only gone to DerbyCon, so I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but I gone there, and for 3 days, I see people sitting anywhere pretty much in a computer doing the CTF. 3 days, that's all they did. I see these people, they don't move. I don't know if they sleep, because I'm actually out sleeping, because, I want to be that guy, but it's I don't want to be that guy because I'm too damn old to try to be that guy again. I've missed that. So, you see it, and there's other people in the industry who've been there and somehow built out of it. I think of Dave Kennedy, who's now, out there trying to further educate people. He's gone beyond the 3-day CTF fest. How do you be the guy who sat there for 3 days doing the CTF and then end up, being like the Dave Kennedys or the people who actually make a name for themselves? How do people break out of that kind of
Well,
circle?
I see. I had a name for it myself. I know exactly what you're talking about. See, I used to call it breaking out of my confinement.
Hmm.
You know, the first confinement that I broke myself out of was the whole ghetto mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a how can I learn Perl and break CGI scripts if I'm still thinking about the hood? I had to get rid of the hood to learn Perl and break CGI scripts. And then once I got into that, and now I'm sitting in front of a computer like a nutcase for 20 hours a day, and all I'm doing is hacking, I had to break myself out of that as well.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think, and this is another great point, you know, that a lot of those guys are simply not living. You know, they just need to take a break. They need to go do something different, find a different hobby, and just go live. Because that's another thing that I regret, dude. That I spent 15 years just straight up doing security research, or breaking into something, or trying to fix something, or it's an odd situation when you're in prison. You're like, wow, okay, now I'm living. Now I'm reading Charles Bukowski, and now I'm reading books and writing. I wrote 200 pages while I was in prison of poetry. You know what I'm saying? My bunkie was a rabbi. I spent more time talking politics with him and talking history and religion with him than I did ever.
No, wait. Okay, I'm sorry. That's another whole story. I'm going to ask about the rabbi. There's a rabbi in prison. That sounds like the beginning of a joke.
No. My bunkie, my roommate, was a rabbi.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, he had a great story. Oh man.
Okay. Well, we won't touch on that one, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing with me. I'm not. I don't know. I don't know. You have to force yourself to become an introvert or an extrovert. For a long time, I didn't want to interact with people. I would go and I'd literally sit in a corner and talk to a fern in a big building. Getting out there doing this podcast, for instance, was something that I agonized over for a good year before I was like, man, I can do this. And then I was like, well, what if it sucks? What if nobody likes it? What if? What if?
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm glad that you made that move. I'm glad you made a decision to just get the podcast going. You're living right now. So,
well, I'm sweating in other places when I do any kind of interviews or anything, or go out and I network or do whatever. It really makes me comfortable.
No, you can't do that, brother. You can't do that. You got to be confident. You got to be confident in yourself. Listen, at the end of the day, you only got one life. Once his life is over, that's it, bro. Story's gone. Everything's done. You might as well enjoy it and try to escalate your privileges as far as you can.
Yep. Pseudo live. Yeah.
You go. Pseudo live, man.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have to confess, I had to look up Asperger's, but
it's on the autism spectrum.
We won't talk about that. But you said you spent the last couple of years catching up. I mean, what were you catching up with? Were you catching up with your old buddies? Were you catching up with security in general?
I just came back. I just came back online like 8 months ago. So that entire time from 2012 to 2015, most of it, I was offline living.
Okay, so you had to come back and return all the new attack vectors and. Let
me tell you something, Bob. You know how they say I'm trying to keep it clean, but you know how to ride a bicycle after a while, and you stop and then you jump right on.
Yeah.
As soon as I came back, it all came back to me.
So okay, all right. So let me ask you something. You're involved with all the the pen testing and everything at your current company. Do you understand what serialization is?
Oh yeah.
Okay, could you explain that to me? Because I've seen that all over Twitter and everything, and I've tried to do some research on that. And I don't understand what Java serialization is. I heard Risky Business talk about it.
It's gorgeous, brother. It's a gorgeous attack vector. Get this. So imagine if, and all the languages do it. PHP, Ruby, Python, Java. It doesn't matter. They all do it. Some applications, the ones that are questionable, will allow you to pass along a serialized object, which is basically like trying to put it in an analogy or something. It's like a snapshot of a function. All right.
Okay.
And you pass that right along to the application, whether it's through cookies, whether it's through headers, perimeters. And the application takes the serialized snapshot of this so-called function with the information inside, whether it's a login, whether it's a digest, whatever it is, and then it breaks it down and it absorbs it into the application. I'm trying to keep it as layman as I can.
Please do, because I'm a layman.
And so, well, I'm Hector. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, right on.
So once the application accepts and it essentially absorbs this snapshot, this object, now it's part of the process. Now it's part of the memory. And now if there's some bad code somewhere that's reading that object, and there's a potential for you breaking out of that serialized object and executing a command or adding a new function to the program, and somehow that could execute, then you just own that application. Mm. So I'll give you a great example of a recent pen test that I did where, wow, what's the name of this PHP platform? It's a PHP platform, CodeIgniter. CodeIgniter does it. And CodeIgniter's been it's been a PHP platform people have been using for years to kind of like organize their project sources. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And so what's odd is when you're monitoring the traffic between the clients and the application itself, whether you use Burp or Fiddler or whatever. I use Fiddler. I'm old school. Mm-hmm. Shout out to I forgot the guy's name, but shout out to the developers.
Yeah.
Fiddler 2 is great. So anyways, you're watching the traffic and you start to see that the cookies is the cookie is in an odd format, and it's basically in a PHP, serialized object. Now that object gets taken into, it gets accepted through the cookie, it gets absorbed by the PHP app, and then it takes the serialized data and adds it to an array. Mm-hmm. All right, and then it grabs your IP address, it grabs the timestamp, it grabs your login hash and your email, and then adds it to records. Now let's say that a vulnerable application, a vulnerable CodeIgniter application, takes that same serialized data and saves it to a cache file on the server. Now, let's take it one step further. Right? So now, it's a three-step, it's a three-step attack here. So first, you're going to pass through your payload through the PHP serialized objects. PHP accepts it, or rather CodeIgniter does, and now it's added to an array. And that array is saved to a cache file, which is saved as a PHP file on the web server. Mm-hmm. The second thing you need to do is locate said cache file, right? And I guess it's only two steps, because the first step, your original payload is going to be a PHP shell. Mm-hmm. So once you locate the cache file on the web server, boom, you have a PHP shell literally instantly. So that's how it would work against a PHP CodeIgniter vulnerable application. With the Java application, it's the same exact process. You need to find a Java application that takes in serialized data, absorbs that, and adds it to, I don't know, let's say it does something iffy with it. It does something funky with that serialized data. And if you could turn that into RCE, then boom, you're good. But of course, it really depends on the application that's using serialized data. Technically, you could use serialized data all you want. Now, if the application is not vulnerable to an attack, it cannot be reverse engineered to produce a reverse shell or something, then you should be all right.
Okay. Because it's one of those.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, that it's basically you're able to upload something to your PHP server that gives you a shell.
Well, it's not that simple, but yeah, it's there. It's close. It's close to that.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing about this is that, and I've been auditing JSP applications for a long, long time, even before I even wasted my time with Anonymous. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. One thing you'll notice is that a lot of Apache Tomcat servers or a lot of Java-based web servers are running as root. So if you could take a small serialization bug that gives you, a regular command execution, you're basically turning it into a remote root exploit.
Okay. Very
Oh
nice.
yeah,
Very
it's
nice.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's like I was listening to Patrick Gray, who does a really great Risky Business podcast over there, and he had a gentleman on last week talking about Java serialization, and I was like, okay, this is kind of going over my head, and I had the OSCP thing going on at the time, so I couldn't do it, my due diligence to do some research on it. So,
Well, what's your favorite programming language, by chance?
Yeah. I didn't come from a developer or a coding background, so I'm actually learning Python and Ruby as I go along
Beautiful.
here. So,
all right. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you a case study. All right. So
Okay.
when you're bored one of these days on a weekend or something when you're not working,
Mhm.
you're gonna load up Python and you're gonna import the module pickle or C pickle, and you're gonna read the manual and look at the functions, and you're gonna pickle a serialized object, and you're gonna save it as a file on your file system. And then what I want you to do is transfer that same serialized object file to another computer and load up Python and load that function up through pickle. And what you're gonna find is you're gonna essentially execute commands on your other machine. Um, if you really want to learn about serialization, play with Python and Pickle, and you're going to really enjoy the experience.
Is there truly anything Python can't do? I'm asking. That's.
I love Python. I've been coding in Python since version 1.4.9, I think.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Betcher, do you have any other questions? Because this gentleman needs to get himself in bed.
Feel free, guys. Ask away.
A lot of the black hats nowadays that I've come across use malware to I guess they run the command and control, and the malware does everything for them. And I hesitate to call them black hats because I think the real black hats are the guys that write the malware in the first place. I mean, have you ever used malware, or is that I'm pretty sure that you've
there's two things I didn't get into. Actually, there's three things. One was malware. Two was reverse engineering, which I would love to do one day, but I just can't sit there and try to reverse engineer an application, a binary for too long. I get bored. And three, and there's a funny story to this, is owning NT boxes or NT servers, Windows NT. The reason for that is back in the early 2000s, it was a big trend to hack into IIS servers using the msadc.pl exploit by Rainforest Puppy. Everyone and their mother did it. And it was one of those things where like, oh, I wouldn't never hack into an IIS server because, I'm all about Unix, right? So no, to answer your question, I'm not really into malware. It's not really
kind of
what
a Windows type thing.
It's just not my thing.
It's like fishing. It's like everybody does it. It's the easiest way to get into something. You seem like you want to take the kind of harder road to get to where you need to get.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm not glorifying any of my attacks, but there's one specific attack I did of a security company where not only did I do the intrusion, then I infiltrated the network, but I also used social engineering by reading my target's emails and then replicating the way he wrote to gain access to the other network. And in order to gain access to that other network, I had to social engineer, a security analyst. And he basically opened up the firewall and gave me root access.
Oh, wow.
So, I definitely use a lot of social engineering in my attacks in the past. And now as a pen test lead, and I run my team for the company I work for, I am doing social engineering campaigns. And, but as for the whole malware stuff, I'm not really down with that.
Yeah.
But social engineering is powerful. And it goes back to what I said earlier, that you're only as strong as your weakest link. Now, when Brian asked me that question, what could corporate security do to better their situation? I said, education.
Education. Yeah.
If you educate your secretary, she's not going to click on an obviously messed up, spear phishing attack. You also have to remember a lot of these APTs do not speak English primarily. We're talking about Chinese actors or Russian actors. or people from, from that region, and their English is obviously broken, and whatever, it is what it is. But if you're getting an email from your bank or from your security staff and it's all messed up and broken, you should probably not click on the link, But also look at the URL, look at the email headers. It only takes 10 seconds of your life. If you could teach your secretary to do that, by all means, I guarantee you, your corporate security is going to be doing much better.
Very good.
So,
they got services for that, though. Hey, I'll write your email attack, your social engineering email for you. Just pay me, and it'll be in brilliant English because I got an English degree and blah blah blah. So
yeah. That's why I said you gotta look at the headers.
They outsource that, man.
Yeah, you gotta, once you start educating people and you start teaching them all these different angles, this whole conversation right here is a good way to teach somebody that there's so many attack vectors out there, and most of it is human. It always goes back to the human. You know how many networks I infiltrated, highly secure networks, I infiltrated because of configuration issues. And that's what made me infamous in the underground before I got with Anonymous. People knew I could get into networks just because I would sit there and replicate their environment. And I would purposely misconfigure something just to see what's the end result. It's especially in those days, obviously, like, I'm not glorifying any of that, so don't get me wrong. But even in those days, if I could turn a path disclosure into a remote route, then obviously, I was really looking at everything. So,
you were able to get in there because they weren't really monitoring their network. They may have had a SIEM running that was gathering all the data, but they weren't really monitoring their network, even though...
How many companies now really monitor their network?
That is,
what I'm saying?
Very true, yes.
Even to today, 2016, most companies do not monitor their networks, including security companies. So, I think the only ones that probably do are banks, and they have to, because they have to deal with PCI compliance. They got to deal with attorney generals. They got to deal with lawsuits. They got to deal with a whole bunch of drama they do not want to deal with, especially losing money. So, what I would like to see that happening is in the hospitals. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Hospital records are invaluable to any attacker. And, we need to focus on stuff like that. We need to educate these hospitals, even the small ones. The small ones are the ones that are really being attacked, and that's something that someone needs to take charge of, and security is complicated, but it's also very simple.
Yep. So, Hector,
yes.
Let's say I have a company that I own and I have some valuable data. It's valuable to me. It's my business, my life's work, right? Yeah. And I hire somebody. Let's say I hire you, and then I find out that you were a blackhead in the past. I'm more likely to say no.
Oh yeah.
To you coming in, because if you were a blackhead once, it's much easier for you to return to that, right? And have you ever run into that situation? And do you kind of put it off? Do you respect their decision? Do you see where they're coming from?
Well, I'm a realist. I fully understand what, if someone has doubts, if they feel uncomfortable. I try my best to answer any questions, and I try my best to prove myself. But I have no choice but to respect the decision. I mean, I can't force myself upon anybody. I can't just say, well, you have to hire me because we already started the contract. No, like, it is what it is. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Yep. Eventually I'll prove myself to whoever needs it. But, I'm just trudging along. There's not much I could do besides just work and stay professional and take care of my family. And so far I'm doing great. So I'm not really complaining too much.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, are you still on retainer with the FBI, or have they let you go?
I have no relationship with the FBI since March 7th, 2012. I have not spoken to them. I have no relationship with them.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I have nothing to do with them. And, a lot of people ask me the same question. And I'm always curious, like, I think a lot of it is that people they haven't dealt with the FBI.
Yeah.
So they think that, once the FBI gets you, they have a hold over you for the rest of your life. Nah, it doesn't work that way.
Well, I was thinking like The Godfather. Yeah, I done you a favor. You're gonna come back and help me in the future. That kind of thing.
Well, the FBI did me no favors, that's for sure.
Nah,
But
that's true. That's true.
no, actually they did. They did. In one regard, even though they use that extortion technique of threatening to take the kids away, which I think is the most cowardly thing you could ever do to a man. They kept the promise that I wouldn't lose the kids. So I still got the girls, and in fact, they're both in honor roll, and they're big and beautiful, and they're going to school and doing really good. And that's the only positive out of all this.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, there's a second positive. I'm actually living. I was so stuck in that whole black hat thing for so long that I didn't realize I was not living. It goes back to the conversation we was having before. Now I'm enjoying myself. Now I could just travel and I just came back from DC a couple weeks ago. I went to see the Lincoln Memorial. Why did I do it? Randomly, for no reason. Well, there is a reason. I'm living. So,
Yeah.
it's crazy how things happen. I know I hate cliches, but I do believe that some things are meant to happen. Things are just meant to be. So.
Very cool.
So Black Hat for you was like a drug. It was an addiction, right? Like
I never said that.
Almost like a gamer, right? They sit in their hole for 20 hours a day.
No, it was not for me. It might be for others. It was for me. It was more of an escape.
Oh.
I said that about 3 times so far today. That was a big escape for me.
Well, that's what they say about drugs, right? They help you escape reality.
Yeah, so I guess I was a hack addict. I mean, I guess so.
Yep.
No, but I was escaping from a lot of problems. I mean, I was, when you grow up in an environment, especially when you're involved in organized crime and you're dealing with murderers on a day-to-day basis, my father he almost went to prison for life. He was an enforcer. My father had kidnappings, and my father was a really dangerous individual. And it's good now that I'm older and much wiser. I can sit back and analyze.
You had to break the cycle.
I had to break the cycle. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly what I was trying to say. I had to break that cycle, and it sucks that it had to happen this way.
Yeah.
But I'm just grateful that it happened at all, because it goes back to that early thing that I told you guys. What if I was not caught? How far would I have gone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the same could be applied to any hacker. Think about a random script kiddie. And by the way, I don't say script kiddie in a bad way. I'm not downing anybody. I just don't. I guess a neophyte. There you go. I'll use that word.
Neophyte.
So let's say a neophyte accidentally scanning through just some random network that's the firewall went down just at the right time for him, and it just so happens that he got access to he had access to, let's say, a drone control center or something. He was able to control drones. He was able to remotely control one drone. And it just so happens that drone is circling over Washington, D.C., the Pentagon or something. What would that kid do? Let's say it's a 13-year-old kid from Pakistan. But let's say he's not religious and he's not, he's just too young. He's too innocent for that. What does he do at this point? And that's the mystery question. Now let's flip it around. Now let's say it's a professional Russian hacker from either organized crime or working for the government, and he runs into the same drone, control center, operations center. Now what does he do? These are the kind of questions that I sit there and I get all philosophical about it, and I try to apply that to myself. Like, what would I have done? This is what we need to all think about in hindsight. We need to analyze this. And I'm just rambling right now. You guys are quiet over there.
No, you'd put yourself a back door, right?
What?
You'd put a back door in so that you could think about it and come back later, potentially.
Well, it depends on if you understand the ramifications of your actions. The kid from Pakistan, he may not understand that what he's got is a weapon of war, and he may try to use it if it's like a Reaper or something like that, an M9 Reaper, whereas the Russian guy may use it for a more precise strike, where that kid would just see it as, I'm playing a video game, I'm going to go play Grand Theft Auto with this drone.
Oh yeah. So it's just interesting to think about. I think about this stuff all the time. When I was in prison, for example, I would read the newspapers. I think one of the hacks I remember from prison was I forgot. It was just a random story that I read, and it was saying that it was the Russians. They were doing this. It was a massive hack, a massive leak, a massive database, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, kind of situation where I'm in my cell. I can't access the computer, but I'm already visualizing how they got in. I'm already visualizing how they exfiltrated 90 million records.
Yeah.
There is a point, especially when doing security research for so long, where you don't even have to hack into the system. You already know how to break into it. There's some I don't know. I don't even know how to put it. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, the one last question I think we want to ask, because we're way over time now, is what is the future looking like for you? What do you plan to accomplish? Where are you planning to go? And what did you wish you knew then that you know now that you might have done different?
Well, right now things are looking good for me. I have a nice, great job with some great people. I'm able to take care of my family, and not only financially, but just be that like kind of like a pater familias, the father figure, the person that could actually provide and do something. I'm glad to be in that situation. I'm glad that I'm able to help my family. And as for the future, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing, stay into security research. A lot of people have asked me to write a book about this entire story. I might do it, I might not, because I'm pretty much done with it. I'm over it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But mostly it's just helping the company I'm working with build up, get bigger. I want to see some success. I want to see some progress. And that's what my life is about right now. Cool. As for the second part to your question, if I could go back and...
What? Well, I was just thinking about if, you've got somebody out there who is doing some naughty stuff and they happen to listen to the podcast. I don't know why they would, because, we're a different audience, but if they're, they're like, oh, I can get into this and I have access to this and I just need to do X to do this. What would you say to somebody like that who is like a proto you? And would you tell them to stop? Would you tell them that, you can do it?
Exactly what I would say. Nah, I would say, listen, man, look at me. Look at how far I got. Like I completely taken over entire TLDs, top level domains. I've completely compromised entire governments. I've hit everything from A to Z. And what did it get me? Nothing. It didn't get me anything. Besides a little fame on the internet, besides a little infamy after my arrest. Was it really worth it? No, it's not. Take those same skills you're gaining by breaking into stuff and instead apply it to something else. If you're from like a third world country, whatever, if you're from in the middle of Sri Lanka and you got these skills, try to build up a security company, start working with your neighbors, present yourself to people, go to conferences. You got to connect and network. And I guarantee you someone's going to use your skills. You could say that there's a million hackers in the world, but it's not enough hackers in the world. And I'm not talking about just black hats breaking everything. I'm talking about people that could help other people. So if you're going through that whole black hat situation, take it from me, it's not worth it. If you need to make some money, go join a bug bounty program. Go to hackerone.com and sign up. You'll be all right. But it's not worth it. Trust me.
Right on. So, Hector, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you to maybe talk or, to, discuss? I mean, obviously you like to collaborate. There must be InfoSec people that like to discuss with you on the social networks. How would they get a hold of you then?
Well, I mean, you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter name is HX Monsegur. And once you go there, you'll find my email address, which is hxm.public@gmail.com.
Okay.
And just feel free to hit me up. I've had a lot of people hit me up asking me a billion questions, and I answer all the questions. It just takes me a while because I'm working, but
sure.
I try to stay positive and give people positivity. So if they have to ask me a random question, then by all means, please do.
Right on. Mr. Betcher, how do people get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss security with you?
I'm on Twitter as well, at Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED.
Right on. You can find the official BreakSec podcast Twitter at BreakSec, BRAKE-SEC. You can find me, Brian Brake, at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Tumblr. If you have an RSS reader, we're on iTunes, Player.fm, Twitch, TuneIn radio app. We have a Patreon. If you find value in this podcast, which I may just support myself now that I've heard this interview, this was fantastic. You can, we have Dane and Casey and Miss Sunny and Nathaniel and Secure who have been so generous to donate money to support us. All of that money goes to domain and maintenance for monthly upkeep. So if you find value in the podcast, please feel free to go over and give a buck or two. Doesn't if you don't, the podcast's still free, so it would be much appreciated. So Hector, I don't think I've ever had sweaty palms and during a podcast. I mean, this was a really, really great interview, and I appreciate you coming on. And, we tell people this all the time. We really mean it. If you have something you'd like to come and talk about, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to have you back on again to discuss something, technical nature. If you want to come on and talk more about the, specific attack or something like that, we'd love to have you on.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you guys for having me, and this was a great conversation, and I hope a lot of listeners get to enjoy it.
Right on.
All right.
So that was it for this week on Breaking Down Security. You have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.